Thank you, everybody, and welcome. I'm super happy that you're all here, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion. Feel free also to comment on each other's answers or to ask another follow-up question if you're interested. Okay, but who are these people? Alice, super happy to be here with you. Alice Vieillefosse is a managing director of GravitHy, a low-carbon iron producer that recently raised 60 million. Congratulations. I mean, you survived at least one valley of death. Funding round to build and operate its first low CO2 iron plant in Fos-sur-Mer, which is near Marseille in France. Alice has 15 years of experience in the energy sector, working closely on innovation and security of supply issues. She worked on various positions within French ministries and at EDF Energy. She's an engineer of the Corps des Ponts, des Eaux et des Forêts, and a graduate of IFP School. Is that correct? Very good. Okay.
Everything good.
Very good. Emma, super happy to be here. Managing Director of the European Battery Alliance. Emma has more than 2 decades of experience in environmental engineering and battery manufacturing. You were previously Chief Environmental Officer and President of Northvolt Materials, gaining first-hand experience in growing battery production, navigating complex industrial ecosystems. Emma previously held roles at IWA Publishing, Elsevier, I know that one, ABB Power Generation, Inc., and also co-owned Remedy by Sweden, AB. She has a PhD in Energy and Environmental Technology from Malorden University, and has been involved in research projects focusing on sustainable energy and business practices. Welcome. Florent, Executive Vice President with Capgemini and Group of Head Cleantech. Previously Vice President Energy and Utilities Lead at Capgemini Invent. Having begun his career in the oil and energy sector, me too actually, Florent has spent many years helping companies deliver their strategies for energy transition, acceleration, and global transformation, notably leveraging digital technology such as smart buildings, e-mobility, and smart energy. Francois Gaudet is head of unit in the Cleantech Equity and Growth Finance Division at the European Investment Bank, where he develops innovative financing solutions across energy, transport, bio, and circular economy sectors. Under his leadership, the bank's Cleantech value debt portfolio grew to 1.3 billion by end of 2023. He previously served as principal advisor at the European PPP Expertise Center, and before that held senior roles at the EBRD in London and Ukraine, focusing on municipal and environmental infrastructure. Earlier in his career, he worked at JP Morgan Chase Private Equity Asia on telecom sector restructuring. A Canadian and British national, he holds a law degree, cum laude, from the University of Ottawa and a diploma in financial management from ACCA UK. And lastly, but certainly not least, Philipp. Dr. Philipp Matthes is director at Siemens Financial Services and has over 15 years of experience in the energy industry. With his background in different roles, such as strategy, business development, and M&A, he's now promoting sustainable investments to drive the energy transition and industrial decarbonization. He has established a successful cooperation between Siemens Financial Services and InnoEnergy and facilitated also several co-investments. In addition, until recently, he was managing director of WUNH2, one of the largest operating green hydrogen plants in Germany, which is successfully drove through development and construction into operations. He has a diploma as well as a PhD in business administration from the University of Regensburg and an MBA from Murrow State University in USA. That was difficult for me to memorize, and that's why I read it, okay? Okay, so to kick off, to get the conversation going, maybe just one word, and if you like, let's say a phrase. From your perspective, what is the single biggest enabler for successfully scaling a clean tech project from pilot to industrial scale? You want to start, Philipp?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jakob. I would say regulatory predictability and timely policy implementation. not only in direct subsidies, but to enable long-term offtake, which is key for bankability.
I think it was more than one, but okay, Emma?
I'm in the same direction, actually. You need a pull in the market. So somehow there needs to be offtake, and there needs to be a true offtake, preferably more than one customer, but there needs to be a desire for the product. That's number one.
Right.
This is all true, and I agree, but just to be a bit different, I think that to be able to scale is you need to have the right team and a massive dose of resilience. Because the scaling part is very different from the initial demonstration part, the commercialization part, and then you have this other valley of death to climb. So it takes a certain skill set and resilience to do it.
So from my side, I would say courage and sweat. Courage, because to some extent you have to take the right decision at every step. It's not just for the company, but the financing parties, the public policies. Everyone needs to have courage to scale. And sweat, because you need a lot of effort to succeed in the scaling up.
Florent?
Well, I can only say all of the above, obviously. And I would add something on our side that we see it's the end-to-end integration. Very often we see companies that come with a great tech, but haven't made the proof that beside having one component that work, another component that work, they can integrate that into a successful technology that work at the plant level. Because scaling that makes it even harder, and integrating in their customer is really the challenging part.
Well, thank you. I think we're going to cover most of those areas. What I like is also the human factor in there, and what some people call the softer side. And I hope we will be able to, at the end of the discussion, also touch upon that. But I think it's also obvious that we need money, right? So we need for the things like GravitHy more than $1 billion, Vercor way more than $1 billion, etc., etc. We need tons of money, and so it needs to be investable before it can actually be bankable. So let's explore that a little bit. Francois, EIB. How do you see the role of the EIB and public finance in creating the conditions for a company to become investable and then hopefully later on also bankable at a later stage, and especially in that risky scale-up phase between innovation and scaling?
I think people have different views and definition of scaling, but if you talk about the initial phase where the scaling of the technology as its commercialization and entry into market, I think that us at the European Investment Bank, through our venture debt program, which is really there to support the integration of technologies in their market with risk-bearing capacity that is taking a longer term at a bankable time. I think that's a quite significant intervention. Then I think colleagues that are in the project structured finance, they pick up from there at the point where the technology is de-risk and the market is tracking, or they take measures on offtakes to de-risk. So I think that these are kind of our tools to do it. And there is from the venture debt, we are rolling out a scale-up program where companies are not totally yet bankable on commercial large scale. So basically increasing this quasi-equity kind of risk appetite to bring them to a phase. Of course, it's shorter term because they should get to full commercial bankability, but we're rolling that out. So those are the main kind of tools. But one of the things that we have noticed also is that a lot of companies that are in deep tech, clean tech, have a very long sales cycle, and their business model requires them to place orders, and they ask for prepayments from clients, and then the integration takes a while, and then the acceptance of their large installations makes that their working capital days are very, very long, and that takes up a lot of capital. And at that stage, the only resource they have is really to finance it with equity, which is really expensive. So we see a number of companies that are, in kind of this phase, and we look at the business plan, and when when you play with the Excel and you tweak the model and you explode it, we say, well, actually, they can't afford their growth. They can't afford to go into that stage. They're going to crash. The working capital is just not following. So what we are rolling out on a pilot basis, when we realize that, is that we're rolling out a guarantee working capital facility, which for the pilot phase, which is a 250 million pilot that we're launching, is going to co-finance with our venture debt that I mentioned earlier. But really, it's going to be a facility for companies to go to their commercial bank, have them that are willing to issue a working capital facility, and we're going to quadruple that. So if they get 2 million, we will issue guarantees for 8 so that they can provide that and help them scale. So that's what we're thinking of right now.
Yeah, I would love to hear maybe if there's time also later on what sort of criteria they need to meet to be eligible for such a, but that would be really great. Alice, you were able to raise recently 60 million euros worth of money for your Series A. In your opinion, what was it that convinced investors to come over the bridge and invest together 60 million?
I think what is really key for a business is, of course, its offtake, what business you're in. Do you have the right team also that was mentioned? And what are the steps that we've achieved? So I think that on offtake, of course, it's key to see how things are going. In our Series A, we already had a sale agent agreement with Rio Tinto, which was bringing a lot of credibility to the project on this offtake side. We also had Matthes, which is a steelmaker, on board, and which was really important to explain that. We had secured most of our intakes. And to some extent, also the quality of our cap table, our shareholders, was bringing a lot of expertise, and I'm really happy because actually I have 3 of my shareholders here at this round table. Of course, it's very important because at the end, it's not just a team of a bunch of people, but it will be built through partnerships, very strong partnerships, because we'll need to have project finance. Project finance is not the most flexible element, and you need to build something in a very moving world. And moving world will require a lot of flexibility. So therefore, that's why you need to have a very strong partnership with the offtakes and throughout all the value chain to make it happen.
Okay, great. Philipp, when you look at Cleantech ventures that are going to require large sums of money, either as equity or debt, what is it that you particularly look at those stages? Maybe you can elaborate on the various stages, and then what are you looking at that will give you enough confidence to say, okay, we're willing to consider an investment?
Yeah, happy to elaborate on this. I won't mention offtake now. I think we had it a lot of times today and we'll also hear it tomorrow. So let me give you a few other examples. First one, for example, is project readiness, right? The project needs to move beyond a conceptual stage. We wouldn't invest in a concept on paper, but there needs to be ideally a pre-feasibility study finished with successful results. A site would need to be selected and, for example, first LOIs, grid access, things like that would need to be secured, right? So really move the project from a conceptual, really early development stage into something where GravitHy just was with Series A raising something more. And then, of course, what also adds up is a credible investor group. And GravitHy is again a really good example here, but also other ventures such as Vertigy, or we also invested into a large aluminium development project in Finland, where we have really large credible partners, ideally strategic investors who can not only, or who can provide additional value add, such as offtake or technology know-how, but also financial investors who kind of often balance the investor perspective and bring some more, let's say, professionalism into the governance and the credibility, long-term credibility, and also then, of course, to be ready for the FID large project financing. And last but not least, it's important that these off-takers are also, let's say, capable and interested to reinvest if there's a need, right? There may be and there will be cost overruns usually, right? We read it a lot, but that's really important for the investor group. And then last but not least, the team, of course, is also very important also for these company buildings, not only for startups on the technology side. The team is really important.
Well, thank you. Florent, your company advises Cleantech companies along their journey. Can you share some insights of what Capgemini has seen of, let's say, pitfalls that you can also advise them to be careful for? What is your, let's say, experience in covering those scaling companies?
Yeah, so again, I won't repeat what has been said regarding the team and so on, but on the pitfalls, there is, I would say, two. One that we see regularly. The first one, it's moving from the concept to really the scale up, and that's where usually companies are not ready for that phase because they have not, for some of them, anticipated what it means to be at an industrial scale. So, for instance, in the US, we work with a very innovative company. They have a great product. They have a lot of offtake. But now they have to deliver on the product. And in fact, they have not prepared their product to be industrialized. So we are working with them to do the miniaturization, the industrialization, and even down to the instruction for the operator to assemble the product because they had not thought of this. So they are losing time because of that. But then the other real challenge we see, it's the commissioning phase. And it's not all and it's already very hard to deliver the project on time and on budget. And by the way, it's not a Cleantech problem. All the industry, in any industrial project, has that. I think I've read somewhere that 98% of construction projects have overruns. So it's not specific to Cleantech. I won't mention the nuclear industry, but even the Berlin airport is known for that, traditional thing. So that's already very hard. But a lot of the innovators think of, okay, I need to reach this milestone, but often what they don't anticipate is the operational readiness. I need to ramp up. And if I'm not really focused on ramping up quickly to reach the target yield and so on, and maybe Emma will elaborate a bit on that, that's where you burn a lot of cash that sometimes is not in the business case. So that's one of the first common pitfalls, and that's very hard, and investors are more and more looking into it. The second one, and I'm in Capgemini, so I have to mention it, it's building first and digitalizing after. And we believe it's a mistake because now everything needs to be digital first, but also because since you are building first of a kind, you don't have a lot of history to anticipate the failures and go faster in the learning loops to improve your process. So that's why I believe it's really important to start right from the start to collect the data and use them in your ramp up. So that your task force that are really looking at preparing your project and optimizing your processes have the data to learn and go faster into solving all those issues. So, and there's two pitfalls. Some companies go too deep into AI and data and where they should stabilize their process first, and some do it after. And we work with companies who then have to pay more because they realize suddenly that they need this data for their operational need. So that's.
All right, thank you, Florent. Emma, maybe building also what Florent just said, maybe you can share some of your experiences that you've had while working in the battery industry, and what would be your main takeaways for this audience and others to avoid those pitfalls.
Do we have a few hours, or? I'm sorry.
I wish, but no. Let's say the main ones.
No, we have quite a few experiences, and I really resonate with what's been said already. And I think that what you have to do in terms of complexity, because it all boils down to the situation where you have your project financing, and then you have to make sure that you sort of isolate that into the project. And then when you go into manufacturing and you go for your sort of scaling rounds in your finance, then you have to sort of reevaluate, and you have to re-emphasize that it's this actual project, the first project, in its simplicity or its initial form, that needs to focus from the team, and it may or may not be the same team, but it has to be re-emphasized that this is now the focus, because it's incredibly easy to replicate, but there is a time and a place for everything. And then I also think that to go into the project phase. So you have your first phase, which is startup, and then you have your build, buy, onboard kind of phase, and then you have your sale and delivery phase after that. But in your sort of mid phase, it's like a marriage. You have your shareholders, you have the management team, you have the lenders, and it's really not the time to question things. You're in there for bad and for good. You're in there to sort of collaborate in hard times. And once you go in there, the team really needs to focus. So you need to set things beforehand, and you need to sort of address the coming complexity and be prepared to be agile. So let's say, for instance, that there was a market projection and a volume projection where you're expected to sell, I don't know, 100 giga in 2026. So you have 100 giga contracted. And then it turns out that the market, it goes a little bit. The scale-up is not 100% what you expected in terms of project readiness at that time because of COVID or because of war or whatever. You have the equipment on planes instead of ships or whatever happens. Then you have to go back to the initial plan, and you have to iron it out together, and you have to figure out the solution. It can't be one team focusing on one thing, where the team that's supposed to take us out of Death Valley focuses on managing this team, and then you have another investor team trying to beat the management up for something else. During that phase, when you build, deliver, and sell, it's like a marriage. You have to stay in there together.
Well, thank you very much. Back to you, Alice. Again, building on your very recent experience on raising capital, can you share? We discussed about how important the offtake is, but in your experience, do you sometimes see how difficult was it for GravitHy to convince the investors? And would you say that sometimes there is a mismatch between the expectations of a financier and what a company like GravitHy can actually deliver on whatever is going to be promised to those financiers?
Yeah, I think that fundraising is a long journey. We have some downs. Sometimes we say it's roller coaster all day long. And to some extent, I was really struck during the fundraising process about for me in Europe, the problem is not really the money, because to some extent we have money and we have this ability, but the problem is more the mindset. And when we were doing the fundraising process, it was really interesting because during all the calls with European financiers, we had the 30 reasons why our project would fail. So we were just more in a defensive mode, I would say. And when we had investors, for example, in the States, they were like, oh, it's so wonderful what you're doing. At the end, they were not necessarily investing, but at least we had the energy afterwards. And for me, one of the key takeaways is if we want to reindustrialize Europe to scale up, we also need to change the mindset. And it's just not the mindset of GravitHy, but it's the mindset of everyone, because we will need existing industry, we will need financier, we will need public services. If we look, for example, at the big success, Tesla, there had been so many analyses saying that they would go bankrupt, it was terrible. If you look at China 30 years ago, everybody was saying, oh, China, no way they're going to be better than Europe. So it's possible. We have proof that it's possible. But to some extent, we just have to start believing a bit more, I would say.
Emma, would you like to build on what was just said, also building again from your experience at Northvolt?
Yes, of course. I mean, I fully agree. We have to remember that when the car industry in the US was about to go under, Tesla being one of them, there was $85 billion put on the table to save it. And we are struggling with the battery industry today to get 1.8. So you take 85 against 1.8. And I mean, of course, we have to make sure that we do it. We have a very, very strong and long tradition in Europe with an excellent industry. It's based on strong processes. It's based on understanding exactly every step, every paper, everything. And of course, any established industry would say that all of these startups are sloppy, not there yet, they're not doing it right, they're immature, the founders don't have the right mindset, and so on and so on. And of course, we have to change management a bit as we go because we need to embed this kind of thinking. But what we do know is that it's one thing knowing how it should be in the end, 50 years after starting. It's another thing to have somebody who's willing to take the personal risk, to stick his nose out, to do all the selling to all of this. And if they are not there, there will be no base industry in any of these fields, and we will be consumed by the other continents that have the tradition to go big and go fast.
Francois, back to you. I think that without public money, I think that it will not just get done, because you cannot just rely just on private investors. Would you believe that today there's enough and right instruments also from the EIB to guide, provided that the investment is a good one, that you have the right team and offtake, blah, 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 to guide those through the tech companies through those various values of depth? Do you think, or are we missing maybe here and there a right instrument?
I don't know. We at EIB we are, you know, we're a lender. We're not a grant giver. So, you know, we have to look at with, you know, our eyes quite wide open at what's in front of us, and we're there to be catalytic of other funders also. So the market is looking at us with confidence to bring them along. So with that brings a lot of responsibility. Now, we have the resources to do it, and we are doing it at large scale. Whether, you know, other public kind of funding could come along, of course, you can always have, you know, either helicopter money or targeted money, and I think, you know, through the Innovation Fund, with the EIC that is doing a great job, there are a number of European programs. So, I don't know. We feel that we have enough resources. We talk to people, and we are really deploying, you know, heavily. EIC is deploying, Innovation Funds deploying, our project finance people are also deploying. But when you look at the project finance people, as I say, it needs to be set in a certain context. And yes, they do have as kind of like tattooed on their forehead, offtakes, offtakes, offtakes. And that's, you know, there's a reason for that. Now, do we have enough public funding to get, you know, maybe that buffer risk or kind of like add resilience in the system so that, you know, it kind of relaxes a bit the project financiers? Maybe, I don't know. But just to bounce back on what Emma was saying earlier about, you know, kind of, we're asking, you know, what do you need to scale up and, you know, you need to be in phases and stick with the phase. Let me just bring maybe one point from the finance perspective, what we think about a lot when we're looking at these scale-up phases, because they are phases. First, be really realistic about the difficulty that you will have through that phase. You cannot, you know, the business plan is a projection of what you want to achieve, but you need to build some resilience in there. And I don't know if it's because entrepreneurs kind of oversell it to their investors, or they don't want to show that they need to have some resilience built into it, but do think about it. Because the last thing you want to be is to be in between phases, because at that point, as Emma said, you're married to the group and you don't want to invite other people to the party because they're going to crash the party. So you really need to build resilience and be funded with, clear objectives for that phase. Because people work in phases. You have different sets of investors for phases. You have different financial product for phases. The last thing you want to do is, being caught without a chair when the music stops between phases. And that's, from a finance perspective, somebody that thinks about that really shows that we have contingencies, we've thought about it. We're not sold blindly to our business plan, not that we don't stand by it, but we know that we need to be resilient against it.
Emma, go ahead.
Yeah, and I fully agree. And I also want to add something, and that is, if you want to replicate, make sure that that phase is not contaminated by other projects or other phases, because there could be a different replication coming along, of course, but make sure that you are in comfortable end of the first phase before the replication starts. So make sure that the new projects that are funded by other structures in other phases, but that's not cannibalizing on the teams that are there to focus. So that's also something to bring to the replication story.
So, but now I'm going off script. So I told you guys I was going to do that. But building on this, the fact that you have those various phases. And Florent, you also mentioned earlier on that you might have an entrepreneur, my words, that is really great in building up something, but then it reaches a critical point where you might need different team and different leadership. Now, this could, we'll see how the conversation goes, but would you then, for instance, from your perspective or from your group, then also advise those companies that you advise on, hey, maybe this is the time where you should get in some new skills? And I would like to ask you all this question so you guys can already chew on it, but do you see this and do you actually interfere in that or do you give advice for that?
Well, we are advisor. We are not investor most of the time. So often that's what the investor do. But obviously we are often when we have very intimate conversation with the company we work with, because they are the startup. Yes, obviously you see the lacks. You see that they need some new skills to reinforce, to accelerate. That maybe they need more seniority in some function. So that's where either we help them provide something or put them in contact, or yes, give this feedback, because I mean, it's I'm pushing an open door, but obviously, as somebody said, different scales, different profiles. It's not the same profile for the innovation phase, the ramp up, and I mean, it's known in every industry. The innovators is good at hunting as a developer spirit. Is not the one who has the same spirit when it needs to be process-wise, etc. So you need to balance the profile, and sometimes company don't do it, and it's hard for especially the founders to leave the hand to somebody new to the company. But yes, it's a must, and that's where the governance plays a key role, I believe, and the investor governance plays a key role.
Philipp, we know you as a Siemens Financial Services, an active investor, so it's not investing and then leaning back. Do you see also this, let's say, the problems around a team that needs to evolving, where maybe the expectations as an investors are not being met by the actual team that has received the investment?
Certainly, we see that every now and then in our investments, but of course, any discussion on the personnel is always a delicate one, right? But it doesn't help also avoiding the discussion, right? So what we try to typically is generate a frank, open discussion around it, consult with your co-shareholders, but then you need to analyze, right? What is the position? What is the risk at stake at the moment? Do you have a really good substitute, or is it just a bet that the successor will be better than the other one? So it's a complicated discussion.
It is. Emma, would you like to, if you can, share some experience?
I think that discussion is complicated, yes, but it's also generic in the way that it's not only about people, it's about maybe the product, or it's about the customer, or it's about the whatever, because it could also be that you find out that you have to do a fundamental change in your flow sheet, if it's a process, or in your product, because the customer asks for something else. So, I mean, when you go industrial, you serve a market. You serve your shareholders and you serve your market. That's it. You have to be agnostic to other personal things if you're a founder. So as long as you are receptive to that, to restructure your team, to restructure whatever you produce, to deliver to your market and to your shareholders, it's fine. But I think that the problem is when you sort of, when you're stuck, yes, that's when, and then you're not really meeting the expectations that are here and now, because you can't change, unless you're SpaceX, then you can change the world. But the rest of us have to deliver to a market and to our shareholders.
Alice, how many people are now with GravitHy?
So today at GravitHy we're 43. And at Series A, so 5 months ago, we were 15. So for this discussion, I would say that there is first a problem of scale, because you have a team that is evolving all the time, and you don't need at all the same process when we were 5 people 2 years ago, or 15, or 43. It means that the information doesn't flow at all the same way. So you have to reinvent all the time the internal process to be sure that they match the need of the company, that the people have the right information to do their job. For the people, of course, we do not need necessarily the same skill set at each step, but I would say that it's just not individual. It's how to build a team, because the problem in project like GravitHy is not just like we have the project to be built and we have the finance that will work and then the legal, is that everyone have to work together. So we have not just to find the best individual person, but we have to have the best team that is able to work together and say, okay, I might be a bit late on my stream because in your stream, you need my help to make it work, because at the end we have to go see the lenders, and it's the project directors that have to convince them and just pitch and explain the technical problems to the due diligence. So that's what we've been focusing on with José and myself in the last months, is clearly scaling the team and having the right team, the right leadership team, and the right team below. Because for the next step, we know that we will need this to evolve, and we'll also need to evolve the mindset. We're still a scale-up. At some point, we will be constructing a company and then operating, which means, for example, that we're starting also like safety shares, because we have to start not just building a vision and convincing, but we also need to start to have very clear rules that safety is a key priority as a company, as an industrial company. So of course, it's one of the big challenges of the leadership, and thanks to the help also of the shareholders, it's very interesting because they can also share their own experience to be sure that we put the right elements at the right moment.
Francois, you would like to comment?
Yeah, again, on the finance side, when we talk to CEOs, it's about, we're investing in people. We're investing in capacity of people to grow. They're at a kind of really transformational stage of their company, and their capacity to see that, well, you've been researching and developing, but how are you seeing the transition? Just their vision of, well, I have all these PhDs that are moving my technology. I said, yeah, but when are you building in the actual production capacity? And all those guys, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to transition that? And very quickly, when you have a leader that projects himself and his organization, you feel it very quickly. And the first kind of sign of that for us in early stage, small organization, they're not big. They can't afford to have a full C-suite. But the first stage is he able to recognize that he's going to have to stop moonlighting on finance function, and he needs to grow? He needs first to have a good, to get everybody comfortable, to have very good finance function. For us, it's kind of like, the canary in the mine to see where is that going? You deeper, and it's more complex than just that. But for us, on the finance side, that's kind of the first signs we see of leadership.
Great, thank you. Florent, let's talk about the factory floor. Maybe you can share some insights on what Capgemini does to make sure that at the right moment things are taken into account, like AI, digitalization and such, robotization. Maybe you can share some of your experiences with that. At what stage the scale-up should be starting about this? Is it maybe too early or too late? And
well, the challenge usually is not should you invest. It's not one versus the other. I mean, you have to do a bit of all, automation, robotization, and so on, and investing in digital skills as well. It's more a matter of sequencing. There's no point for companies who are in the early stage to jump into putting AI everywhere, as long as they are not clear on the way they want to build their company, the one they want to operate it, what will be the processes. So they need some stability first, but don't put it too late. So there's, we usually say when you start to do your engineering phase, that's where you need not to jump directly into all the AI buzz, but you need to anticipate the fact that you will need data. So you need to put the right requirements in your engineering design so that you don't miss it when you will need it in the operation phase. First to balance your construction phase as well, but when you need it in the operation phase, because we see two extremes. We see companies who are overthinking, I want to be AI first and spend a lot of time on that, and sometimes get lost into complexity of something that in the end won't be completely fit for purpose, because the reality, from pilot to manufacturing, you've said it, it's not 10 times more complex, it's 100 times more complex. And the problem you will have to solve are 1,000 times more complex than you have imagined. So everything you have built on paper won't work. But you need the backbone of data in which you will pick. And the other extreme is the one who don't do it at all and suddenly realize, oh, I need the data because now it's not possible for me to identify the root cause of my problem. So I need the data, so I need to deploy the sensor, solve the system, and so on. And in the end, it costs them more because and sometimes 3 times more, because they are putting an add-on or even scrapping some of their initial investment. And we see that as well. So that's where we try to help and advise on saying, okay, here's what you should not miss in the early stage. And you should also, in your team, have somebody that understand that understand the data layer and architecture. Because if you don't have it right from the start, he will come back. So and you need to make sure that he communicates clearly with the business people, that he's not alone sitting in his corner doing all the data and digital stuff. He needs to speak with the operation, with the process people, so that they all work together.
Emma, how does this resonate?
No, I agree. And I mean, we have a strong tradition in this. And I want to make an example of a conversation I had the other day on the simplification, what you said, some overdo it. So just to also put in the focus on the cost effectiveness, because we are in a time now where we want to do everything and we want to do it up front. And what they wanted to do was to take the cloud data processing into a on-site data center structure. And when we talked about it a bit, it turns out what I hear, who also has a background in ABB, is what they need is a local server. In traditional industry, everybody has a local server. So you also have to remember that there are cheap solutions that have been developed by companies like Siemens, for instance, for years and decades, and they are there to support our industry. So sometimes also, don't overdo it. Use the libraries, use the experiences, make sure that the European strength is really taken into this new industry and into the fleets, so that we don't invent the wheels for our new industry, because then we will not make it. And that, I can say, was one of the big challenges we had in Northvolt. So the not invented here culture was quite strong with us.
So Emma mentioned Siemens, financial and Siemens, but before that, Alice, does this ring a bell? Are you at GravitHy already thinking about the things that Florent was mentioning?
Yeah, of course, on digitalization, we already had a partnership with Capgemini and Siemens also in the early stage. So it's always a question like, at what time do we need to do what? And we're always asking, like, does it make sense? And what is the right timing? And when are we able to do that? And if we don't do that, what is the impact? And if we do it, does it enable us to go faster? And actually, it's important to have the different steps, because sometimes, of course, you would like to do it, but it's just not the right time now, and it's okay to do it afterwards. So it's always a question we ask ourselves and the team. And our real focus, and what I always say to the team, is that you have to improve every day. Like, you can improve just by 1% or 0.1%, I don't care. But let's look for improvement, including in the decision-making process, to be sure that we make the right choice.
Philipp, do you have examples on how Siemens supports initiatives like this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and we don't only want to provide finance means, right, to these projects or companies. We also have the background of a large multinational, international technology corporation. We can combine basically financial expertise and technological know-how, and have the opportunity to enable also for these companies the broad access to this technological know-how that Siemens has along all the fields of automation, digitalization, which we have heard a couple of times, electrification, and for us it's very important that we always do it with an at arm's length principle, right? So there's a finance part and there's a technology part. Both need to make sense, right? And if needed, and if useful, we do it with our partners, like Capgemini, for example. And in projects like GravitHy, it works. And I think we need to roll it out in other projects as well.
Alice, talking about access to clean energy, how much energy does GravitHy need when it becomes online?
Yeah, so GravitHy, we need a lot of electricity because we produce our own hydrogen. We have 700 megawatts electrolyzer capacity. And for the process in itself, the DRI, we have on top of that 300 megawatts. So in total, 1 gigawatt, which is very important. That's why we're in France, because indeed France is an exporting country on electricity. We have a lot of capacity, fully decarbonized. One of the most reliable grids as well, because reliability is important for processes like ours. And it's clearly why we went also in France, and we have these great sites also with great logistic around to try also to streamline all the elements that are needed among the projects. And what is important to remind, I think, is that, of course, electricity is key for decarbonization because Europe, we don't have any fossil fuel. So if you want to reindustrialize, you will need actually electricity, decarbonized electricity a lot. And this is just the reality of Europe, because otherwise we won't have any more fossil fuel anyhow.
Francois, I got the impression that you were impressed with the amount of electrolyzer capacity there.
Yeah, it's you know, we are with our innovation product, we've invested in electrolyzing technology, and we're quite bullish on the development. We realize that we need to be efficient, and we're also facing pressure from outside, and we need our own resilience capacity. But that's a very impressive project in production terms. But I think that the capacity is there in Europe, and also with all the technical expertise to build these large projects. And I think that I agree. We need to be confident that we can do it, and I think that's with what we have, like just looking at my co-panelists here, the technique capacity, kind of the foresight and the ambitions are there. I think that also on the financing side, we need to line up with that. But yes, it is very impressive.
And how do you, as a EIB, look at this massive demand? How do you let's say, quantify the risk of such a high demand?
Well, you know, the hydrogen kind of, you know, wave that we've been through, you know, has had its up and downs also. There's, you know, we're also looking at sustainable aviation fuel, different kind of carbon uses that are, you know, combining and using hydrogen. The reality is that there, on the commercial deployment, and again, has nothing to say on the commercial proposition of GravitHy, but there's a lot of projects that are, you know, not passing FID, and I think that we also need, in these large ambitions, to ask ourselves, you know, what is this electron carrier meaning for deployment, and how is the value added? Now, I think that we need to recognize that it is a carrier that helps decarbonize, and I think that we go back to not a conversation that is so fashionable this year, but we need to go back at it, is what is the real cost of CO2 abatement. And then once you really put the right price on that, then there's a lot of these things that start making a lot of commercial sense. So if we think of the hydrogen kind of wave, I think that's a real question.
Question for the two French nationals here. Alice, you mentioned already France is a power exporting country. But you need more than just power for ventures like GravitHy and Vertigy to land. What is, let's say, the secret of France to attracting those very big projects and actually have them to land in France? What's your secret?
I don't know if I'm a French representative, a French government representative, but well, Alice said it. Predictability of the low carbon electricity is something that is attractive. So when we have a base load that is available, you can predict. The Nordic countries as well. Spain has a lot of solar. So what's the difference is that France can offer you know, a base load that is attractive, but that's not all. The permitting issue we have in France, I mean, it's too long. It's not the only country. I think in Germany, what the German government did on reshuffling completely the permitting process is very interesting, to really shorten and reduce the permitting cycle from multiple months. So that's something that we should be looking at in other countries to see how we can accelerate those projects, because the access to the grid is really what is critical for all this, and that's what's taking long. I mean, in your planning, I think that counts. So that's something that we need to work not only in France, I think, in many other parts of the country.
Alice, anything you would like to add?
No, maybe just, I think what is important is, of course, to have support from national and local authorities. GravitHy has been labeled a project of national interest, which enable us to have quicker permitting, but it's also a label that enabled us to have a bit more strength beyond electricity, logistics, because France is a bit central into Europe, so it's also very good because logistics can make a lot of difference in the pricing at the end. So better logistic means also a better advantage and positioning on the market, and the skilled workforce, because we have, even if we have a decreased industry, we still have skilled workforce, engineers in France, which is good for a project like ours indeed.
Yeah. Talking about this, and before I ask you the final question, skilled labor force, that's something that we've touched upon but not really discussed. Emma, Alice, when you're ramping up your venture, you need a skilled labor force, and I can imagine that at Northvolt, attracting people in the north of Sweden was quite of a challenge. Can you? But regardless if it was in north of Sweden or somewhere else, how did you do that?
I think it was actually one of the most successful stories of Northvolt. We had 6,000 employees, roughly, and from 109 countries. and they were handpicked from the most forefront industry. So many of them spent years, 25, 30 years in battery industry in Asia. We had a team of 700 R&D engineers in Västerås, for instance, coming from Japan and Korea mainly, and China. So that was the most. And then the second thing on that was how that team stayed together, and how, when we now sent out the requests for Lighten, the new buyer of the Northvolt assets in Sweden, sent out a request to 3,000 people, only 26 sent the answers that they were not interested, but all of the others answered that they would be interested to come back to the company if there was an opportunity. So to create a talented team that are willing to spend all of their passion into something because it changes the world, that's the strongest asset you can have.
Alice, are you already worried about your future labor force?
It's clearly a concern we have. Our HR director is already working a lot with local partners to start, because if you need some, for example, 700 megawatt electrolyzer, you will need some specific know-how, DRI facility you don't have yet in France. So we are already starting with local authorities and local industries to start the training, because training usually takes a year at minimum, and before that you need to handle the courses. So that's something we're already working on to be ready, because when we will have the commissioning, indeed we will need this skilled workforce and all the blue collars, of course. We also see, as a step we're in, that we haven't built a lot of industries in Europe in the last 10 years. So when you want to have an experienced project director that successfully built different plants in heavy industry, it's not so common, but we're really happy to have found one. And it's very good also to succeed to find the right expertise, but it's a lot of energy, indeed, that is needed to get the right team at the right moment.
All right, thank you. Okay, now a question to you all. I'll start with you, Philipp. If you could change one structural barrier in Europe today to accelerate clean tech industrialization, what would it be?
Personally, I would like to see a higher CO2 price, because obviously the cheap fossil energy does not really reflect the societal costs associated to it. And then projects would not have to fight for green premium, but companies would fight for avoiding grey penalties.
Okay, thank you. Emma?
I would like to see a very strong push for local supply in the different sectors, and that it's, we talk about level playing field, but it's very clear to the industry where they should buy from and how they can support a resilient industry throughout the value chain. That we need to clarify. We need a 20-year plan, similar to the ones that the other continents have created for themselves.
And by local, you mean European?
Europe, of course.
Okay,
of
okay.
course.
Okay.
Not,
no.
not Portuguese.
No, I understand. Francois?
I'm a big supporter of kind of carbon equalization. I think it's key for so many things to happen. But I'll stick on the finance side. I think that achieving a union-wide harmonization and integration of regulatory systems and finance platforms is key, so that players can evolve within Europe. We have a beautiful market, a large market, an important market, a focused market on climate technologies. We shouldn't have the barriers we have. So to me, that's one of the key elements.
Alice, this is your time to...
Yeah, if I had a wish list, I would say protect the market, because to some extent we have this great market, but today we have a lot of wolves, and we have a very nice sheep saying, eat me, but to some extent we need fences to avoid the wolves to come in. And also accept failure, meaning not that it's good to have failure, but we will fail by growing, and therefore If we need to grow, we will need to have new industry. We know that big project fails sometime as well. And we need to learn from our mistakes and to accept this also, because otherwise we will just kill the industry, because of course if there has been one failure, it doesn't mean that all industry is doomed. It just means that we have to learn about it, and it's what human nature is just improving.
Thank you.
I call it the hangover effect. Everybody is hangover after these things, and it calms everybody down rather than moving forward.
Florent.
Well, I like the hangover effect. I'll keep it for another one. I come back to what you said earlier, the mindset. I think I traveled in the States a few weeks back, and I was shocked to see that now they're really focused on the scale up. So not so much in speech, because we do a lot of speech. I mean, we've heard those speech for long, but into practical action. And I was fascinated to see that we have a lot of funds, private equity, infra funds, who are looking at to deep tech, climate tech, and their obsession is not finding the next thing, it's scale up. And they are working on bridging the financing gap. So we have weapons in Europe who can do it, but also how do we bridge the technical gap? How do we make them technical ready for scale up? So they are combining that, and we are working with some funds exactly on that. So the funds are saying, okay, we want to invest, but we want them to scale fast, and we want them to be ready to scale up. So we are looking also for technical and operational readiness. So I think the mindset shift that we saw in the US, we should adopt the same mindset in Europe.
Like here.
Oh, sorry?
A mindset just like here, right?
Exactly. Well, thank you all. It was super interesting. It was very interesting to hear the various perspectives. I would like to thank you for joining this panel. Can I hear an applause for the panelists?